So, sort of in keeping with today's theme of discussion for social change, um, just wanted to kind of sort of keep our mind focused in the same area, and that the session goal is to learn about multicultural backgrounds and how that could influence design. And just provide a place for an open dialogue without any judgment, because I know some of these conversations can get very sensitive, and with this environment, I think that we also need a place to just be able to dialogue. And then, of course, always with the focus of empathy and towards all humankinds, right? All right.
Great. So if you guys have any questions, you can type it into the chat box and I can read it off. Or if you'd like to turn your camera on and unmute yourself, raise your hand and you can ask yourself. Get started. And I can start with the first question. Did you find that having a multicultural background aided you in design?
Go ahead, Maria. I think.
Oh, I was going to say, do you want to go first? But yeah, I personally, yes, I think it did. I know, especially when I was in school, I always went back to my heritage and used kind of architectural elements or motifs from what I knew from my culture. And so it was important. I think it's important, and I did feel that it was helpful. And even today as a professional, just having that my background, I'm able to work in different countries, and especially in Mexico. I'm participating in projects just because of my cultural background. So it is beneficial. And I think all cultures, it's beneficial. I think it's a positive thing. And employers and companies are very multicultural, and obviously seek out the team members that would make the right fit for those projects.
Yeah, I would say when I was in the industry, this was a while ago, but still back then we were just starting to open up to projects, international projects. Our firms would enter competitions, and sometimes it would be from Asia, which is my background, and then I would be part of that conversation, right? We would write proposals, so I would just be part of that conversation as we start to think about, how do we approach client, and how do we approach the team, even how to build a team. So that was really helpful. I myself did not have a chance to work on an international project, but I could definitely see how that could have really benefited. I was waiting to be able to participate in one, but none of them came through. I do remember one time though, we were going for a project, and it was a project in Abu Dhabi at the time, and we had to hire a cultural consultant, and I never heard of that at the time, right? So I'm sure now it's no big deal, right? Now there's probably a cultural consultant on every project, and I just thought how wonderful that is, to be able to learn about other cultures, and so when we do go to these meetings, that we don't sit with, showing the sole of our feet, because that could be very insulting for certain cultures. So I think that type of, diversity, right, in a team, in team membership, it's really important.
Yeah, I would say definitely it's multicultural and multi-language is definitely a valuable asset too. So I think like right now, especially with the remote working, everything is just, I feel like we're like more global than ever. Since the pandemic starts, I started working on projects like with the London office, with the New York office. So like your location really doesn't become a big problem anymore. So so you started working on more global projects. I'll say one of the examples I have is when I started at HLW in 2016. I got on the project, the Google Shanghai project. So I got on it because I'm Chinese and I know the language, right? So it's a really fun project. I was really excited back then as a junior designer. It really made it easy for me to do the research of the concept. Sometimes I do research in Chinese because, you know, some language that just doesn't translate the exact way. So I think that definitely brings certain set of values to the team. Another fun thing is Google, they always name their meeting rooms, like they name their meeting rooms in a certain topics. So we end up deciding to name the meeting rooms with the Chinese games and activities. So there are total 26 rooms. So we had a lot of fun just kind of brainstorm what Chinese like activities we can name them, how can we design the meeting rooms. So I think that's definitely, so you wouldn't, so one really fun example, I don't know if anyone knows what's plaza dancing. So that's actually end up being one of the names of the meeting rooms. So it's the equivalent to like outdoor kind of dance, group dancing, but for like older people who retired already, they really like don't have much to do. They just go outside in the plaza and dance. So it's really fun. So I'd say yes, good asset.
Okay, thank you. Did you often take inspiration from both of your cultures if you had more than one? And if so, what were the biggest areas you took inspiration for, like example, food or dances you just mentioned or tradition?
Well, for the Chinese culture, because my ethnic background is Chinese, but I was born in Korea, so that Chinese and Korean thing. Of course, there's always the feng shui, right, and how to implement that in design. But I think that never really, I think, penetrated the Western culture, right? Because I think there was, I don't know, I don't think it was embraced completely here. But the theory is still, you know, valid. I think if anything, I feel like the understanding of being an ethnic minority in this country, right? There's a sort of sensitivity, and so I just tend to approach every project with the mindset that not everyone is of the same ethnic background. So that's just embedded in how I think and process projects. I don't think that's something that I did it conscientiously. I think that's just kind of very naturally, I think about that, you know, I was talking about practicing empathy in design, right? That's what we do as designers, right? That's one of the first things as you research. And I know that that's just embedded in how I approach projects, but I don't know if that's necessarily true of everyone. And so I would really emphasize that, right?
Yeah, I on my end, definitely because Mexico has so many regions and each region has like their own unique qualities. So it's like taking some of the main ingredients, so to speak, and then reinterpreting them in a more modern way because in this modern day and age, you always want it to be a little bit more modern versus so traditional. And sometimes when you're designing in Mexico, there's just a lot of richness, but you have the demographic has changed a lot. And you have a lot of the classes, it's like the rich and the poor. And so you see that difference, it's very literal. And when depending on where you're designing, you want to bring in some of those more cultural elements, but you also want to make them interpret them in a more modern way. So, and there's an educational process with your own teammates that you're working with too. They're not as familiar, so there's a lot of research that goes into the process as well. But I would say that some of the things that I always tap into are like the colors, the art. There's a lot of regional art, a very beautiful regional art, and also the cuisine.
Yeah, for me, I think definitely Chinese, like more traditional art and then traditional architecture of like Chinese architecture. But then because I grew up in China and I spent half my life there, so for me, more like thinking like human behaviors, like what I tend to like to do, like what I feel comfortable, like what my family feel comfortable, like in a space, because we are designing space for people to work in. So just that always in back of my head, like thinking about how our culture, how we act and behave in a different way, and like putting that into design. So more in that way. Of course, there's certain project like when we design some like Asian restaurant or like certain themed offices, we do bring in that element. But I think for me, mostly it's that kind of human behavior element.
And we also want to be careful not to get themey, right? Because when we bring a lot of, this different, yeah, so.
Yeah. I know it's
Yeah.
not a good words now.
Mhm.
As like an interior design student, that's one struggle or a thing that our teachers really help us with is like, if you're going to do like a themed restaurant, don't try to design it themed. Definitely research the culture and, take
Mhm.
inspiration, but be very mindful of that
I was
too.
also going to say I'm really jealous of Maria and Waina because they've gotten to work on international projects, exercise, these diversity. Because, when I left about even 10 years ago, it was almost like, oh, you want to kind of, do I dare say whitewash everything? You don't want to bring any ethnic diversity into a project or into a design. So it's great to see that the industry is changing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For people who just hopped in, just let you know we're doing a question and answer session. So if you have a question for our three panelists, feel free to type it in the chat, or you may unmute yourself and ask if you'd like. And so were there ever times you felt hindered within the interior design industry because of your ethnicity?
Maria, you want to take that first?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I thought about that a lot. I'm thinking about it, and I, I would say no. I think because of my ethnicity, I've never personally felt anything that I was hindered by it. I would say I was probably more hindered because I'm female, because of, being a woman in a industry that's very male dominated, and also being interior design versus architect. I know some of you are architects, but it is very difficult. I think it's hard for a woman, but I think since I was very small, and I guess the way I was raised, I never let it hinder me. I didn't want it to define me. So I think I just worked harder, and I just, tried to have a good work ethic, be responsible, and just get the work done and meet my deadlines, make sure I was a good employee, etc. So I saw it around me, but I never really felt affected by it personally, or maybe I didn't want to be affected by it. So I just worked harder. So I think like I said, I didn't want that to define me. So I just worked harder in general.
We were talking about this, the three of us kind of got together and talked about it before. So I get really sensitive to this topic, right? This question, because I think it depends on how you choose to see it, right? Maria chose to see it as it didn't affect her or it didn't hinder her. But the fact that she had to work harder, right? And why do you have to work harder? You just work hard, period, not harder, right? I know that, Waina and talked about, we're the ones there on weekends. We're the ones that are there in the evenings. My projects were always selected in design charrettes, right? In a design charrette, when I was at the other firms, my projects are selected, and someone else who is of a different, race, their project was not selected, right? But she got the promotion and she got the raises. And wasn't one time, it was many times. And so it was because I didn't speak up, because I didn't have the confidence to speak up at a young age, because of the three things, right? Not only am I a minority race, we're working in a male-dominated profession, so I'm a female, so that's a second strike against me. And then the third issue was, what was the third one? And race, gender, and profession, right? Race,
A profession, yeah.
and so it was like, I think the triple whammy made us that much more insecure. And I was talking about this with other male professions who are white male architects. And they're like, I never looked at it that way. Well, I never looked at it that way. So it's just interesting, right? And I think this conversation is here for that reason, right? When Dallas asked me to participate, I was kind of like, I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to, you know, like I'm kind of shy. But at the same time, I feel like this is the time to talk about it, right? And this is that uncomfortable conversation that we're having. Geez. You know, and when I was talking to Waina about it, and she's like, oh yeah, no, it's the same thing. I'm like, it hasn't changed. And she's like, it hasn't changed.
Yes,
That made me so sad. That made me so sad. Anyways, that's a good segue for you, Waina.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a little bit different because I didn't grow up here. So I think for me, my biggest struggle is around the language, voice, how to use my voice and speaking up. So that's always my struggle. You know, English is my second language. It's hard. I always feel like it had an effect on my confidence level from the beginning since I moved here. In school, at work, it's just always had that, like, I don't know, like I've always, you know, back of my head, like I'm not good enough. Second is cultural, because grew up in China, you are not allowed to, not saying you're not allowed, you're not encouraged to disagree with authority figures, like your parents, your elders, your teacher, like whatever they say is right. You should not challenge it. So that is a culture I grew up with. So that's like, I don't like to speak a lot in meetings. When principal or lead designer says something, even though I'm not really agreeing, I'm not really disagree with them, I'm just like go with the flow. So that actually sometimes end up with more work. And also I'm not contributing to the design shred because, you know, they are waiting for my opinions. They're like, yeah, you should just voice your opinions. You know, it's just our opinions. It's just another opinion. It doesn't matter. But for me, it's like a little bit different because I grew up in that different environment. So I think this is, and then I think another important thing is I just did the critiques for Dorothy's class. So presenting, as an interior designer, you got critiqued all the time. It's like every single day. So it's never gonna end. Yeah, because either it's a client, you present to a client, they're gonna critique you, or you present internal meetings during the collaboration, everyone gonna critique you. You just feel like you are in a very, very vulnerable position when you present your design. So I think this is already so difficult for if this is your native language. So if you are presenting in a second language, it's getting even harder. So I think this is the only time I question my decision for interior design. I was like, why did I choose this? Like my parents were right, I should just go to accounting or something. So don't do design, hide behind the computers. Yeah, I think this is my biggest struggle, but you know, I'm working on it, starting to speak up in meetings more. So yeah.
You know, to say to that, Wayne, I think it's this mindset that we have to have perfect English, right, to be able to present and not be insecure. Where I think so why do we think other accents are so lovely? I think your accent is lovely, you know, and you have an accent, and be celebrating that, because I mean, it is a diverse, it is a global, you know, world now. We better get used to all these different accents, right? So that's up to us to understand it. So it's a change of mindset. You speak beautifully. You need to continue to present.
Yeah, and to the other side of the coin to that is when you are working on in those international projects, sometimes you're presenting in their native language, so your native language does help you in those projects. You don't have to present in English, you can present in your native language. So it's happened to me in the past.
Yeah, I think now a lot of it's definitely that mindset of celebrating like all the accent. So now I see a lot of English teachers actually emphasize on just be clear with your communication, but don't worry about you sounds like a native. Because I feel like I got caught up in that I have to be perfect. I have to sound like a native to be good enough, but that's just not realistic. And your accent actually brings more of your personality, so makes you more interesting. I think we should all just slowly change our mindset to like celebrate this, and definitely working on like the articulation and keep learning, but don't get too caught up. I mean, I got caught up for a long time.
All right, I got a question in the chat. What is a dream design project that you would love to work on?
So a dream design project for me would be not working overtime, having enough budget, and the client give us freedom to have fun with it and don't get too much revisions, don't change their mind. I don't think it's possible, but it's just, I don't know. And in a different country, you get to go visit.
For me, my dream my dream design project would probably be designing something that I would start up and own. What would that be? Possibly I like to bake, so maybe some patisserie or something that I could retire and own. That would be my dream project.
So I'm out of the professions for a while, so I'm teaching full time now. I would say anything that's new and different. I find if I do anything more than twice, I get bored. So anything new and different and challenging is always fun for me.
I received another question. How can young designers begin to look through different lenses and provide more inclusive design?
Well, that's where I think the industry is slowly changing, right? I think the industry is realizing that the population in the United States, well, it's more of a global world, and the US, the populace is changing. So we need diversity in the culture, in the workforce. So, I'm so glad to see a wide variety of participants today, because sometimes I feel like as minorities, we have these conversations amongst us all the time, right? And we feel more comfortable having this conversation with, like, just three of us were just talking about it so openly, it was no big deal. But I think part of the conversation has to happen with the racial majority in this country, right? And it isn't just the white people that are in power, right? That needs to change. It's really starting with your generation, which is what makes it so interesting, right? The millennials, and you guys are more aware of the issue, and having these conversations and learning about one another and one another's culture, and just that mindset that we were just talking about different accents and glorifying and celebrating those, I think is good. One thing that I do, and maybe this is a different answer later, but I was reading about, because of all the violence that's happening with our community, there are a lot of articles about that are being written. And one of the key word that I thought was so interesting is that one of the virtue of in the Asian culture is to suffer silently. And that's a virtue. So understanding that from other cultures, and that's why we're silent. It's not because we're what are some of the words that are used to describe us? We're not aloof or stuck up. It's just that's kind of how we are told to, that's how we were raised as part of our culture. So I think understanding one another, I think would make it friendlier. I don't know if I answered the question, but I went on and on, sorry.
Can you ask the question again? I just
Jill went on a little too long. It went in a different direction.
So how can young designers begin to look through a different lens and provide more inclusive design?
I would say just be yourself. Really be yourself. Like try to bring your ideas to the table. Really share your ideas. I know as a young designer, when you just enter the workplace, a lot of us probably hesitate to share ideas. You're like, okay, whatever other senior designers say, whatever principal was saying, it's fine. But we are actually all looking for fresh ideas. If you're in the industry for a couple of years, a few years, you just feel like your ideas are just getting old. You're looking for the new, fresh ideas. I think for young designers, it's really important. Be yourself, bring your own experience in to the mix, because everyone have different experiences. And speak up, just speak up in meetings, even just maybe like one time, just baby steps.
I would say get involved. Try to join, organizations and get your name out there. So when there are conventions, when we're able to go back and, go to Las Vegas for a convention or something, try to speak to HR, to the marketing department, and see if you can get your name on there and get on the panel. I think that's something that I didn't do early on in my career. And it's up to you. You probably have to ask for it versus waiting for someone to put you on the list. So I would say do more of that. I think the industry is a lot more open nowadays to younger designers being more involved and more vocal than it was back in our day. So I highly recommend that.
I received another question. Has diversity been talked about in your place of work? In what ways has it been talked about?
I think in our office is pretty diverse. We have, I think in our office is pretty diverse. Usually, I think one good thing we do before all this happens is we actually change seats every half year. So we change seats every half year, we pick it out of a hat. So you will get a chance to get to know different people, so you don't just stay within your little group. So I think in that way, since we are diverse, we have, Chinese, Vietnamese, like Hispanics and white. So I think, so in that way, you actually get to sit next to a person, even though you don't work on the same project, you get to know that person a little bit better. So I think that was a really good way to make it more inclusive and get people. I think it's really just people getting to know each other. Because if you don't know that person, that culture, you're unfamiliar, that's so easy to create like miscommunications. So you're like, oh, I don't know that, it's unfamiliar, so it's bad.
Yeah, the last year I was at CalSON RTKL, there were a lot of Zoom meetings or Microsoft Team meetings where the different offices would get together or rotate just to talk about diversity issues or commentaries, and they would invite people from the community. For example, we'd have a meeting like this and maybe 3 people from the art community would join and have a discussion like we're having about diversity and just their background and how they were affected by it. So just very similar to this. but with, a longer, I guess, conversation.
Of course, I'm in education, so we talk about it. We've talked about it pretty early on, but I would say that just our faculty in our program, well, because I am from a community college, so we are a minority serving institution. I guess so is Cal State. But the three of us went to a NOMA conference. So NOMA stands for National Organization for Minority Architects. And, it was very helpful to see who the other architects are, who the designers are, what, everyone has said, learn from one another. One of the question in the chat I see is that a current project that incorporates multicultural, like you see so many of those in those conferences, some beautifully super modern and sleek project from a African-American designer who incorporates these beautiful African patterns and geometries, not in a themey way, but in a really beautiful, approach. So I think just seeing, being involved and seeing what's out there, it's really good.
So going off of that question that was shared, can you share an example of a current design that incorporates multicultural influences, a building or structure or advertising campaign that is current?
I don't know if any, well, I'm sure there are. I'm not always so current on, what's in America right now, but I know I just came back from China a few years ago. And I remember some of, international designers I find really interesting. I saw Wang Su, one of Wang Su's project in China. And it really embraced the East and the West, right, culture. And there's a lot of heavy history with Chinese suffering, and he was able to incorporate that with the Western influence. And I think he was educated here, so all of that I think was really interesting to see. Again, like just being out there and exploring international designers beyond American designer or Western designers. Now I know that at Cal State there's a whole GE General Ed for Ethnic Studies, right? So we're starting to look at some of that. How do you integrate design, right? Multicultural, multi-ethnicity. So it'll be an interesting, we were talking about how do we educate the next generation. Wow, I mean, we're starting to do that. So it's exciting.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying I can't think of anything right now for this one.
Yeah, I would say I was working on a project in Belgrade in Serbia, and that was with the locals in Serbians, and also the client, which was from Dubai. And so we were, talking about culture, there's a lot of motifs you can pull from those cultures. So this was basically like a huge city in Serbia that we were designing. So it was, I would say it was more than the city block. It was huge. And it's actually currently under construction. And the part that we worked on, which was the mall, is actually built already. And it wasn't really, it was more modern and more Americanized than it was, cultural or Serbian. But I think that is a good example, because some of the other buildings within that property did have some local cultural motifs incorporated into it and ideas. And it was a combination of many architects, local and international.
All right, I have another question. If you had one piece of advice to give a young interior designer, what would it be?
I feel like we've addressed some of it. Um, but I guess the key takeaway for me would be, I think for people of the minorities to be able to speak up and be confident in just who you are now. I don't think you need to silence yourself, right? And of course, you don't want to be obnoxious about it. You're going to work hard, and you're going. But you know, if you deserve a certain, you need to ask for your raises basically, and don't be afraid to speak up about those things. And you need to ask for that project. You need to go in and believe that you know you're in the firm. They hired you. You're good enough. Like it's okay. So you could go in and ask for that project. I don't know why. Well, I know why, but we don't speak up, and we need to be able to and support one another. I think that's another thing. Like we need to just help each other and pat each other on the back more often and encourage one another instead of tearing each other down. Right? There's that whole thing about what is the crabs, right? Trying to get out of the bucket. That would pull each other down, and we need to not do that. We need to just really support each other. So a lot to think.
Be more empathetic toward each other. Yeah, but in general, though, I was doing some research recently, and I read something that caught my eye, and this is more design, not so much diversity. I'm probably going off on a little tangent, but I read something that this young marketing guy, he used to work for Nike, he used to work for Artist Records, he's kind of in the music industry, and he said, I try to think of an idea every day, or a problem solving, or have a problem solving exercise every day, just to keep on top of it and just to keep his creative juices going. So that's from, I thought that was kind of interesting, because I'm like, wow, an idea every day, that's a lot. But I think that's kind of, I thought that was pretty interesting, because you want to be innovative. So, but coming back to the diversity, I think people just have to just respect each other, be professional and empathetic towards each other, especially in these very sensitive times, because it's very sensitive. And right now with social media, everything is, that's why everybody is so aware of everything. And it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. So you kind of have to take social media with a grain of salt. It could be exaggerated, it cannot be. Right now, I mean, there are some very serious situations happening, but I think, we all have to practice empathy, like Joe was saying, and be professional and be responsible and help one another out, and just speak up if you see something that's happening around you that's not acceptable.
Yeah, I think to continue with Maria's, where Maria's going, we're saying like, think of a new idea every day. I think my advice is also what I'm working on right now. So my advice would be do something uncomfortable every day. No, don't have to be every day, like every week, every month, whatever, every quarter. So set a goal, just, do something uncomfortable, do a comfort challenge. I check my box for this one. So I did my comfort challenge. So I think that's something, personally I'm working on. I would say just keep on that speaking up theme, right? You should speak up when you need help at work, because if you don't, then you end up working overtime, you end up like kill yourself, burn out, whatever. So sometimes you can't avoid it, but if you don't ask, you will never know. If you ask, you're like, okay, so I feel overwhelmed. Maybe they can find help for you. Maybe there are some other people, it's not that busy. So you just have to ask for help. Another thing I think for me is if you're not sure, like 100% with the direction during the meetings, ask again, summarize it in your own words, just ask back the question, because sometimes after 1 hour discussion, no one remembered what is a decision. Like no one actually had a decision. So if you ask, and then you would get off the meeting, you're like, okay, so what exactly is that direction again? So I think just really important when you are not sure, don't assume anything, just ask again. I know it's really hard, at least it's really hard for me. So I think that's something I'm working on too. And to like Joe was saying, like we are not speaking up. I think recently I was listening to a podcast. It kind of like opened up my mind. I'm like, oh wow, because she was saying she's like a speaking coach. So she's like a speaking coach. So she was teaching like English on the social media platform. So she was saying like not speaking up, like not use your voice as a woman. It's generational. It's like it's a very generational, like your parents, your grandparents not really like speaking up either. So passed on this kind of tradition. So that opened up my mind, makes me feel better, because I was like, okay, so I'm not just benefiting myself. If I speak up right now, I work on it, I set example for the next generations. You know, if you do it, more people do it, you just gave courage to more young people to do it. I think then collectively we will all become a little bit better, more confident, and have more empathy towards each other.
To add to that, so as I was saying earlier, I'm reading these articles about written by these Asian women. They're all coming out, and I'm like silently crying. Right, I'm crying as I'm reading these because I feel their pain. So of course I'm sharing this story or this experience with my daughter, who is 19, and she said, I mean, I get it, but I don't really get it. I'm not crying, right? And I said, why not? Because I don't suffer silently. Like I speak up, right? So I'm like, oh, I did a good thing, right? So, I mean, I think I'm really hopeful for the younger generation to be mindful of what's happening and all these movements. I'm so hopeful. So keep it up, guys.
That's great. I got another question. What is the difference between cultural influence and cultural appropriation?
In my perspective, cultural influence is, local, your background or what's happening locally. Cultural appropriation is maybe adapting to it, and maybe new ideas, implementing something. There is a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the influence. Yeah, I don't think. Can't think of good.
I have another question. How do you feel coworkers and managers from the racial majority can be better allies for diversity for marginalized communities within the design industry?
Could you repeat that one more time, please?
Sure. How do you feel coworkers and managers from the racial majority can be better allies for diversity for marginalized communities within the design industry?
With promotions.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Promoting and maybe being better mentors, in terms of, like, I'll give you an example. When I first started in one of my first jobs straight out of Cal State Long Beach. It was an internship, and then it was a real job, like within a week or so. That I learned my basic skill sets at that job. I was there 4 years, and one of the owners, he may have seen potential, because immediately I was on a plane with him to Dallas for a meeting. And he didn't fly me coach, he flew me business class with him. We went to dinner, super professional man. He was the best mentor I ever had. And he was Japanese. He wasn't American, he was Japanese. And in the question that you're posing, I think anyone, no matter what culture, that's how they should treat their employees. They need to, because I've been, I've been on flights with other clients from other cultures, and they treat their staff differently. They'll fly them coach, and the owners fly business class. There's that difference. In here, I was a junior designer, and I was treated just the same. And he actually explained everything to me. He showed me all the basics to design. It was this supermarket. It was a deli supermarket that we were working on. And I just absorbed. I was a sponge. I learned everything, and as much as I could while I was there. But I really admired his professionalism, and the fact that I felt like he took me under his wing, which is basically being a mentor, right? And it was I've been very blessed with the mentors that I've had along my career path. And I hope, more people experience that. And I think it should be experienced.
So I went from a very extremely difficult firm where it was very corporate, right? It was very corporate, very cutthroat, to another firm that was maybe just as large, but it was much more diverse in the LA office. And when I walked, I think it just dawned on me one day when I walked by the conference room and I looked inside, it was very diverse. It was not just one, one race and one gender. It was very diverse, and I felt like I belonged, right? So I think that feeling and seeing promotions and leadership positions that are of different background is really, really important. It's a good message to send. It's a subliminal message that's being sent out. And I don't know if they did it, conscientiously or not. But then the same firm, so it's very, very local, that culture that was being developed. The same firm in Middle America, because then I went to a meeting in Nebraska. I remember people walking by the conference room just to check me out. It wasn't, and I thought it was because I was like, oh, I was so fabulous. It was just because I know I was younger. It was because I was of a different color. Like, they were checking me out because they've never seen an Asian person. So it's just interesting that again, like being aware, being educated, being understanding of other cultures, and the message that you're sending. That conference room, man. When you look in, you want to make sure that that everybody's represented equally. And on weekends, I want to see everyone there, not just the minority few. Come on.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like our firm, we have a lot of women leaders in the leadership, but what I want to see more is minority women in the leadership. So I think promote is definitely one of the items I feel like would help. And I feel like I'm lucky enough. This whole time, every firm I've been in, I always have great mentorships. No matter where they're from, no matter their ethnicity, it's been really lucky. I think I do agree with Maria. The mentorship is so important. Like you just learn so much from them. It's a very, very valuable. What, I have another one. I forgot. It's all right.
I always think about paying it forward. So how I was treated in the past, I've had very good experiences as I was starting my career. I try to pay it forward with, my team members or my coworkers.
I have another question. What is something you think is important for us to know about your race, ethnicity, gender, age, etc., that has affected you?
I know what has affected me. I think early on in my career, because I can't say it now, I never looked my age. I always looked younger than what I was. So I was never taken seriously. That affected me as I looked too young for my age. I can't say the same now because I have white hair now, but you can't see it, but I do.
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel the same. It's like, I'm not that young anymore, but like still like Asians, you just always look younger and people don't take you seriously. They think you're still like a 20-year-old. Like they're like, well, what do you know? And yeah, it's funny you see that too.
I always have to say, I told you so.
I think I'm the opposite. I think, not that I look older, but I think my issue was, I think I alluded to this earlier, that because I'm silent, I know it's hard to believe I'm silent, but I used to be very quiet and very mousy kind of. But people didn't see me as weak. People saw me as aloof. I guess I gave out that vibe. So it's that whole, it's not because I'm not friendly, it's because I'm afraid to take up your time, sad to say. I kind of feel like my maybe voice isn't important, but I've learned to overcome that over time, and I think that has to do with confidence. Sadly to say, but I don't know why we doubt ourselves so much. It's that triple thing: gender, race, profession. I'm hanging my hat on that. And it's the way I was raised. You were raised not to speak up.
Yeah, it's the same thing in the Mexican culture too. I mean, I think there are a lot of similarities with the Mexican culture and the Asian cultures and maybe some other cultures where, like I think Wayna was outlining before, it's that respect for your elders. You say yes, you don't say no, you just take it and you do it. and you kill yourself basically, so I think we all need to learn, everybody needs to know what their limits are and need to start saying no to some things, prioritize what you can and cannot do.
Yeah, another point I just thought of is actually how you like physically, how you carry yourself physically. Because I feel like every time I walk into a meeting room, I tend to like make myself super small. I was like, okay, as quiet as possible, I'm going in there. So I think like that way you just already before you enter a meeting room, you feel like, okay, I'm not confident. I'm not like, as confident as some other people. So I think just like, what's that saying? Like fake it till you make it. Just maybe try to act like, more confident walking into a meeting room. Don't try to be so small. I don't know if anyone else can relate. I just like, don't try to make yourself so small. Like, if you belong to that meeting room, you belong to that meeting room. Just go in there and take some space.
And I was going to say, culturally, we don't ask for things, right? Because we just assume if you're good enough, you will be given that promotion, you will be given that raise. But that's not how it is in the Western culture. I remember, I'm going to date myself. I was reading What Color is Your Parachute? Do you guys remember that book? and that's how I like did my resume, and they talk about tooting your own horn and promoting yourself, and I thought, how weird, like you have to do that, right? But you do. So I think culturally we're, again, I said, a virtue is just to suffer silently. So I think maybe for the racial majority to understand that we're never going to ask. So maybe that's been taken advantage of. So stop that.
And now with social media, it's like LinkedIn, your profile, it means so much. It's so hard for me to update that profile because I'm not about tooting my horn. And that's what it's all about these days with social media. And LinkedIn is a professional platform. And it's basically your resume online. So I would say I'm updating it and getting the guts to do and place certain comments and information. And I would say, as young designers, make sure your LinkedIn profiles are always updated, because it's a live resume. Promote yourself there. I have been listening to a lot of and participating in a lot of WebEx or Zoom meetings with industry leaders, and I hadn't had the time when I was working to really like pay attention to that LinkedIn. Now that I need to, I'm really looking into it. So make sure you take care of that.
Great. And then just so everyone knows, we have 20 minutes left. So if you have any burning questions, make sure you type them in. I have one here. Do you see tooting your horn as racially based or a personal behavior?
A personal behavior.
I think it's cultural. I do.
Maybe.
I do. Because I think that if I was not, I feel a little bit like my parents held me back a little bit. And then when I came here to America, because I came here when I was 9, and I really saw the difference in the two different cultures. So I do think it's cultural, because I think if I grew up here, my daughter is a reflection of who I would have been, right? Who I could have been. The confidence that she has is very different, and that is her personality too. So
yeah, I say it's cultural too, because it's like the environment you grew up with, like it's just how so ingrained in your brain, in your behaviors. Like now I'm working on it, try to improve. It's hard. It's really not easy. So yeah,
it's probably both, but I think it's factoring both. Yeah. I was gonna say that one thing I would tell the young designers is that mistakes are okay, right? That you have to allow yourself to make mistakes. And sometimes I think we either beat ourselves up over the mistakes we made, just make sure they're not costly mistakes, but we beat ourselves up, or also we just like never recover from some of the mistakes. So that could be really hard. So allow yourself that, like, be good to yourself. I think people around you will beat you up enough. So really, really be good to yourself and surround yourself with those that could really support you. I think that's really important in the industry. It gets really exhausting, so.
I have a question. When it comes to those different cultural virtues, like quiet humility versus loud assertion, is it necessary to adapt to the culturally dominant value? Or shouldn't the loud and assertive consider recognizing the virtue of quiet confidence and endurance? And I can repeat that if you need to.
Yeah,
can you?
Yeah.
Get it, but.
Yeah. When it comes to those different cultural virtues, like quiet humility versus loud assertion, is it necessary to adapt to the culturally dominant value, or shouldn't the loud and assertive consider recognizing the virtue of quiet confidence and endurance?
Well, we were talking about respecting each other, right? I don't think we need to do a complete, 180-degree turnaround, right? We have to obviously respect each other's differences. I mean, look, I don't know if you guys know what's going on in China, but there's a lot of discrimination in China too, right? So whoever the cultural dominance is, you have to adapt, but at the same time, you have to respect each other as well. So it isn't just one group's job; it's everyone's job. Right?
Right.
That's the message, right? I mean, we're not here to. I mean, I love the racial majority here. I have friends that are, dominant race here, but it's again it's those few.
Right. I agree. I mean, you have to be yourself, but it boils down to respect. You have to respect everyone's culture and beliefs, and you can't change them. You just need to know how to, live with them, good or bad. But there's only those few that are stirring a lot of issues worldwide, nationally, in our case, right?
Yeah, I think it definitely goes both ways. Like in the meeting room, I feel like usually the loud ones usually dominate, but it doesn't mean they have best ideas. So I think one way you could, well, one is if you are quite, like we were talking about, speaking up, like share your ideas, you are contributing to the project as well. But another one is if you see your friends didn't share their ideas, what you could do is, like, if you see, like, say Sammy didn't speak, what you could help is say, like, oh, Sammy, like, you haven't, what's your thoughts on this? Like, what's your idea on it? Just kind of give like a pass on the torch, just open up the conversation. Sometimes if you say their name and then they were more willing to share their ideas, I think that's another way you can help. Just help each other.
Can I say something about Waina? I'm going to say it because I remember her as a student and she was very quiet and very shy, right? And like listening to her, and she's grown so much. I love it. I love seeing that.
Oh my God, thanks.
See how you guys grow and develop. I mean, so, students, you could be future Waina. I mean, I have a question for the audience. Like, do you guys feel, and I don't know what the percentages of students versus faculty, but do you feel like the industry, are you scared of the industry because of all the unknown and because there's a lot going on right now? Or are you feeling hopeful? What is going on in your minds? I know these questions are trying to get us to talk about it, but I want to know what the audience is feeling in general. I don't know. Can I ask that question?
Yeah, if you guys want to type it in or unmute yourself, feel free to answer.
I don't know if you can hear me. My name's CJ. How's it going?
Hi.
I would say hopeful is probably the best thing, even though things are definitely hectic and chaotic still. But conversations like these, where we can kind of create this open, safe dialogue to talk about what needs to happen, from the people who create the majority of rulings and the majority of morals and values for American culture and United States culture as well. So yeah, it's been really interesting to get your opinions and see like the way that you all have had your experiences in design as well.
Oh, good, because I don't know if this is interesting or not, but anyone else want to share?
I can share.
Danny!
I used to be a design student, and Wayne is one of my best friends. So I love interior design. I was having a little bit of Trouble. I'm still in the design industry. I work at Meow Wolf on like art installations, but I really like my passion is with interior design type of work. But I was really having a lot of trouble with getting my values aligned with the industry and with work-life balance. And yeah, just kind of sometimes I didn't feel like I was working for the nicest clients too. And I just, yeah, so that was always really tough. And I had studied a lot of like sociology. And so social justice has always been something that's like important to me, like kind of a little bit with my work too. So I haven't really left the industry, but I have like I don't know, kind of done I don't know. I would like to be in it more, but it just felt really like the whole thing just felt really kind of like at odds, or even just like with the like hours, I guess, too, like the expectation of the amount of hours and like all the non-union laws too with the industry and stuff like that. So I found like a place where I'm really like working with wonderful people, and it's just like all artists doing really cool things. But I do really love interior design, and it was really kind of tough finding that work life balance. And also when you're something like when you say no and when you have work boundaries, sometimes especially when you're younger, people don't like you, or they don't want to work with you as much. And so that was, I was definitely like a yes person back then, but that has taken like um experience and like confidence to say no and just like being older. But I wish I didn't have to like say yes so much back then. Or yeah.
I think you need to shop around, right? You need to interview the firms as much as they interview you. So don't feel like you're stuck, right? Because there are a lot of different types of, firms that do different types of work where, you have more of that balance. Your weekends are yours.
Yeah, I was reading recently that before it was about not hopping around, jumping from job to job. It didn't look good in your resume. But these days, it's like they're recommending the hopping around. It's totally different now.
Yeah, I feel like now I say, oh, I worked at HLW for 5 years. They're like, oh, wow, that's really long.
Yeah.
And then back then, probably nothing.
Yeah, so it doesn't look bad these days. It actually looks better.
That question came up during one of my interviews, and I was getting really nervous, but then I don't know, it had this like flash in my head about how to answer it.
Mhm.
And man, I came up with a good BS. I said, look, in our industry, you need to jump around. You
Yeah.
need to jump around because every firm works differently, and you learn their process differently.
Mhm.
So if you stayed with one firm for 10 years, that means you only know how to do that, how that firm approaches their work. And so it actually is good to jump around.
Mhm.
As a student, I could definitely relate to a lot of the topics that were brought up tonight, and that, like, always trying to make myself feel small or quiet and not take up too much room or too much space in the room, or just finding that confidence. And then before I went to school for interior design, working in the film industry at like 19, that was a rough experience, just working the long hours and working in a male dominated industry and not meeting the nicest people. So trying to like ignore that experience and just say like, no, like your voice does matter. Speak up and encourage your fellow designers is super important. And so I'm really happy that we're able to have this event and this discussion and you three ladies with us tonight, because I definitely found this valuable, and I hope everyone else did as well. We have about 7 minutes left. Do you guys have any last things that you would like to say?
I would say one more thing that just continued with Danny's concerns. The work-life balance is a real struggle for interior designers. I think I totally, we talk about, like Danny and I sometimes chat about this, and then like so I was in 2019, I worked so many hours. I think I worked total of 2 months of overtime in a year. I was burned out. Like I have no more motivations. Like I don't feel inspired. So, and then that's like followed by a year, like COVID hit. So it's not ideal. So I think right now what I'm really fighting for the work-life balance, because so you have to take care of yourself. Like there always going to be work. If you just keep on working till 1 a.m., there always work there. You can work till 1 a.m. But what you really need, you need to think about what you need to take care of your well-being first, then like other things. Yeah, you can work hard, but if you get sick and you can't work, so your body is actually one of your very valuable asset. And in fighting for the work-life balance, it's a really difficult fight in my head, because if I feel like, oh, last year I was able to work till 10 p.m. and this year I'm only working till 8 p.m. They will think less of me. They will think, oh, Weina's not that helpful anymore. That constant like conversation in my head is really difficult. So I was exhausted sometimes just to try to fight that. But I think it's worth it at the end of the day, because you will function better. Maybe you are more efficient during the day. I think I would definitely suggest you can work hard, but also work smart. Definitely don't burn yourself out. Take care of yourself first, and then everything else can go after.
Yeah, I mean, we're not saying leave right at 4 or cut your hours or anything like that. I mean, there's definitely going to be deadlines, and you have to meet them. But I think the industry hopefully is changing, and we're working with teams from all over the world. And so learning about each other's culture and each other's background is going to be very, very important. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. And study abroad, do that if you can. There are scholarships out there for this type of program. So definitely try to be involved in that type of experience. And of course, professional development in terms of organizations. I think there's so much out there for you guys. It's a matter of you embracing it. There's scholarships all over for IDA, SID, NOMA. So don't be complacent.
Mm-hmm. I think in our industry, there is a lot of cultural diversity in a lot of the firms. And I think it's going to be less of an issue moving forward with everything that's been recently going on. And not that I think it's going to be easy. I mean, I just think we're at a crossroads now, and things should definitely get better moving forward. And I would say just get involved with your organizations and press on and continue to fight for these equalities that we need for everybody. And I think I definitely think everyone's on the bandwagon now. And with, like I said before, with social media, it's all visible. So something has to change.
And tap into your faculty. I mean, Dorothy and Ed and Ron and everyone, David, everyone, I think they're here to help you. So don't be afraid of that. I think sometimes we were so afraid of that in school that we didn't want to talk to the teacher. Yeah, you have to use them. They're there for you. We're here for you. So reach out.
Yeah.
And good luck, everyone. It is really fun. The industry is definitely fun. When you see that building, that line built into a wall of your dreams, it's very, very exciting. So it's definitely worth it. I hope we didn't scare you guys away.
No, it is. I know, right? It's a really fun industry. I have to say it's more fun than architecture because our architect in our office always jealous of us because we always do fun events. They're the boring ones. So it is a really fun industry.
That is definitely true.
Yeah, it's like starting a new job every time you start a new project.
Right.
You get new clients, you get a new team. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining and for your participation. And a huge thank you to our speakers. This was such a great discussion. And I know all of us in DSA are beyond grateful for your time and your wisdom. Be sure to join us at our next virtual event on April 9th, where we will hear from industrial designer Aish Baraton and learn about overcoming biases within the design industry. Thank you all and have a good night.